The snow fell gently that morning, blanketing the settlement in a serene hush. The man sat at the edge of his cabin, watching his children, Jack and Emma, chase each other through the snowdrifts. Their laughter echoed, a melody that warmed his heart despite the biting cold. For the first time in years, peace felt tangible. His life, once defined by chaos and violence, now revolved around these two little souls who had given him a reason to live beyond survival. Jack, the older of the two, crouched down, scooping up a handful of snow and shaping it into a lopsided ball. Emma squealed and tried to dodge, but Jack's throw landed squarely on her shoulder. She retaliated with a laugh, launching a flurry of snow at her brother. The man watched them with a faint smile, his rifle resting against the cabin wall behind him. It was a relic of a past life he hoped never to revisit. He glanced toward the horizon, where the twin suns cast a pale glow over the distant mountains. Something felt off. A faint vibration rippled through the air, almost imperceptible but unmistakable to someone like him. His instincts, honed through years of training and combat, stirred uneasily. He dismissed it for the moment, focusing instead on the joy in front of him. "Dad, look," Jack called out, holding up a crude snowman he and Emma had hastily constructed. Its head was lopsided, and its arms were twigs barely holding up, but the pride on their faces was priceless. "Looks like the toughest snowman I've ever seen," he said, ruffling Jack's hair as Emma giggled. Then it happened. A deafening roar shattered the peaceful silence. The sky split open, and blinding light descended upon the settlement. The children froze, their eyes wide with confusion and fear. The man's instincts took over. He grabbed his rifle, barking at his children to get inside. The ground shook violently as alien ships descended, their sleek, menacing forms blotting out the sky. Explosions erupted in every direction, the once tranquil settlement engulfed in chaos. The man's heart raced as he pushed his children into the cabin, slamming the door behind them. "Stay here. Don't move until I come back," he shouted, his voice trembling with urgency. "Dad, what's happening?" Jack asked, his voice small and frightened. "I'll explain later. Just stay quiet, and don't open this door for anyone but me." He turned and stepped back outside, the cold air biting his face. What he saw froze him in place. The settlement, his home, was being torn apart. The alien invaders moved with ruthless efficiency, their tall, insect-like forms leaving no doubt about their intentions. They weren't here for negotiation. He raised his rifle, the familiar weight a cruel reminder of the life he thought he'd left behind. His first shot dropped one of the invaders instantly, but the sound of the rifle drew their attention. They turned toward him, their alien weapons glowing ominously. He fired again and again, each shot deliberate and precise. Years of training surged to the forefront, and for a brief moment, he felt like the man he once was. But no amount of skill could change the overwhelming odds. They kept coming, their numbers seeming endless. An explosion rocked the cabin behind him, and his heart sank. He spun around, calling for his children, but the cabin was gone, replaced by a smoldering crater. "No!" he screamed, the sound tearing from his throat like a wounded animal. He dropped his rifle and ran to the ruins, his knees hitting the snow as he clawed at the debris. There was no sign of them, just the faint, singed remains of Emma's red scarf fluttering in the icy wind. Something inside him snapped. The grief was all-consuming, but it was quickly replaced by something far more potent: rage. He turned toward the alien invaders, who were already moving to their next target, their disregard for him as obvious as their towering forms. They saw him as insignificant, another human to be exterminated. They were wrong. The man rose slowly, his breath visible in the frigid air. His rifle lay discarded in the snow, but he didn't need it. Not yet. He walked back to the cabin ruins and uncovered a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards. Inside were the tools of a past he had tried to bury, gear that marked him as more than just a man. He was a weapon, forged in fire and blood. He strapped on the gear, each piece a fragment of the person he had sworn never to be again. But for them, for Jack and Emma, he would become that person. He would become worse. As he stood, fully armed, he glanced at the scarf still fluttering in the wind. He took it, tying it around his arm like a badge of honor. His children were gone, but their memory burned within him, fueling the storm that now consumed him. The invaders had taken everything from him. In their arrogance, they had assumed humanity was weak, incapable of striking back. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. He whispered under his breath, his voice steady and cold. "You took my children. Now I'll take everything from you." With that, he vanished into the snowstorm, a shadow of death moving silently toward his first target. The wind howled through the desolate landscape as he moved with purpose, his mind racing with plans. Years of training came back to him like muscle memory, guiding his actions with precision. The Zarnaks were unlike any enemy he had faced before, but warfare had always been about one constant: exploiting weakness. Every opponent had one, and he intended to find theirs. He crouched by the remnants of a collapsed communications tower, pulling out a small device from his pack. It was one of the few pieces of advanced tech he had salvaged from his SAS days. The interface flickered to life as he tapped into the Zarnaks' communication signals. Their guttural language was incomprehensible at first, but patterns emerged as he recorded their transmissions. He needed to understand their movements, their strategies, and most importantly, their vulnerabilities. Hours passed as he pieced together fragments of intel. The Zarnaks operated in structured units, but their overconfidence was evident. They believed humanity to be scattered and disorganized, no threat to their conquest. This arrogance had left them predictable, their patrol routes and supply chains following a rigid schedule. He smiled grimly. Predictability was a weakness he could exploit. He moved silently through the ruins, scavenging what he could. A makeshift workshop became his sanctuary, where he began crafting weapons from salvaged parts. Explosives, tripwires, and traps took shape under his skilled hands. He found an old sniper rifle and spent hours fine-tuning its scope, ensuring it would perform flawlessly when the time came. Everything he built was designed with one purpose: maximum devastation with minimal resources. The hours turned to days, but he never stopped. Each moment was driven by the faces of his children, their laughter echoing in his mind. This wasn't just about revenge. It was a mission to make the Zarnaks regret their arrogance, to show them what a human push to the brink could do. In the quiet moments, he studied their physiology through the data he had collected. The Zarnaks were formidable, but not invincible. Their exoskeletons were thick, but had weak points around the joints. Their sensory organs, while advanced, were vulnerable to overload. He crafted flashbangs specifically calibrated to disorient them, using scavenged materials and his knowledge of their biology. His plan began to take form. He wouldn't face them head-on. That would be suicide. Instead, he would strike from the shadows, picking them off one by one. Guerrilla warfare had always been his strength, and now it would become their nightmare. He mapped out their patrol routes and supply depots, noting the times and locations where they were most vulnerable. Every detail mattered, and he left nothing to chance. His traps were carefully placed, designed to maim and demoralize. Explosives were hidden beneath the snow, triggered by the unsuspecting weight of a Zarnak soldier. Tripwires stretched across narrow paths, ready to unleash chaos on those who tripped them. His arsenal grew, but so did his resolve. This wasn't just about the Zarnaks, it was about proving something fundamental. Humanity wasn't weak. It wasn't insignificant. It was dangerous, resourceful, and relentless. The Zarnaks had made the fatal mistake of underestimating him, and he intended to teach them a lesson they wouldn't survive to remember. As he finished setting the final trap near a supply route, he paused to observe his work. It wasn't enough to kill them. He needed to send a message. He carved a symbol into the snow, a crude representation of his children's names, written in a language the Zarnaks wouldn't understand but would undoubtedly fear. He retreated to higher ground, his sniper rifle positioned perfectly to oversee the trap he had laid. As the first group of Zarnak soldiers approached, he steadied his breathing. His finger rested lightly on the trigger, waiting. He didn't rush. Patience was a virtue he had learned long ago, and it served him well now. The first explosion rocked the area, sending debris and alien bodies flying. The Zarnaks panicked, their formation breaking as they scrambled for cover. He fired his first shot, the bullet piercing through the joint of a soldier's armor. Another shot followed, and another, each one precise and devastating. The survivors fled, leaving behind a scene of destruction. As he packed up his rifle and moved on, he felt no satisfaction, only grim determination. This was just the beginning. The Zarnaks would soon realize their mistake, but by then, it would be far too late. The first strike had been a success, but it was only the start. The Zarnaks had begun to notice something was wrong, their routines disrupted, their confidence shaken. He stayed ahead of them, moving through the snow-covered ruins like a ghost. Each step was deliberate, each move calculated. Their arrogance still blinded them. Even after his initial attack, they underestimated him, believing it was the act of a desperate survivor or a stray anomaly. He used that to his advantage, letting them think they were still in control. But as their patrols grew larger, their weapons more advanced, it became clear they were starting to realize the threat was more significant than they had anticipated. He picked his next target carefully, a small outpost where the Zarnaks stored supplies and coordinated patrols. The structure was exposed, a temporary base they had hastily set up in their conquest of the settlement. He observed it for hours, noting the patterns of movement, the changing guards, and the layout of their defenses. Their discipline was flawed. They relied on their technology and numbers, not on strategy. That was their weakness, and he exploited it mercilessly. He moved under the cover of darkness, planting charges at key structural points. The snow muffled his movements, and the Zarnaks were oblivious to his presence. He worked quickly but methodically, ensuring every explosive was perfectly placed. He didn't plan to simply destroy the outpost. He wanted to turn it into a message. When the explosives detonated, the outpost collapsed in on itself, a roaring inferno lighting up the night. The Zarnaks scrambled, their alien voices filled with panic. He watched from a distance, sniper rifle in hand, taking out any survivors who tried to flee. It wasn't just about killing them. It was about making them afraid. As the flames died down, he left behind another symbol in the snow. This time, he added a line of human words, "You're not invincible." He knew they wouldn't understand the language, but the fear in its unknown meaning would linger. The psychological warfare began to take its toll. The Zarnaks started to change their tactics, pulling back their patrols and fortifying their positions. They were growing desperate, their arrogance crumbling under the weight of his relentless assaults. But desperation bred mistakes, and he capitalized on each one. He intercepted a patrol near the outskirts of the settlement, setting an ambush that left no survivors. Their bodies lay scattered, their alien weapons rendered useless against his precision. He scavenged their gear, using it to further his cause. Each piece of their technology became another tool in his arsenal, modified and repurposed to fit his needs. The Zarnaks began to fear the snow itself, whispering among themselves about the human who could appear and disappear at will. They referred to him in their guttural language as something akin to a specter, a predator they couldn't predict or confront. It was exactly what he wanted. Their fear grew as his attacks escalated. He sabotaged their vehicles, rigged their supply crates with explosives, and turned their own technology against them. Each strike was swift and brutal, leaving them no time to recover. He never stayed in one place for long, always moving, always one step ahead. In their desperation, they deployed a larger force to hunt him down. Dozens of Zarnak's soldiers scoured the ruins, their weapons trained on every shadow. He let them come, drawing them into a trap he had spent days preparing. The ruins became a maze of death, each path leading to explosives, traps, or sniper fire. The Zarnaks fell one by one, their numbers dwindling with each passing hour. He made no sound, left no trace, except for the bodies and the fear he instilled. By the time the last soldier fell, the once mighty force had been reduced to nothing more than scattered remnants. Their weapons lay abandoned in the snow, a testament to their failure. But he wasn't done. The Zarnaks still controlled the skies, their ships a constant reminder of their dominance. To truly break them, he needed to bring those ships down. And for that, he needed something more. He began to focus his efforts on an old human facility buried in the mountains. The Zarnaks had overlooked it, deeming it irrelevant. But he knew better. Within its walls lay the tools he needed to deliver the final blow. And as he prepared for the next phase of his mission, he knew the Zarnaks were running out of time. The facility was buried beneath layers of snow and ice, a forgotten relic of humanity's past. He trudged through the frozen wilderness, his every step calculated to avoid detection. The Zarnaks were still searching for him, their ships patrolling overhead, scanning for any sign of movement. But he had become an expert at eluding their gaze, using the terrain to his advantage. When he reached the entrance, he found it sealed, its ancient doors frozen shut. He worked quickly, using explosives to breach the thick metal. The sound echoed through the empty landscape, but he didn't care. He was too close to stop now. Inside, the air was stale, the facility untouched for years. Dust-covered terminals lined the walls, and the faint hum of dormant machinery filled the silence. He moved deeper into the structure, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. It didn't take long to find what he was looking for, a control room filled with advanced equipment, much of it still functional. He began powering up the systems, each console flickering to life as he worked. The facility had been designed as a last resort weapon during humanity's earlier conflicts, and now it would serve its purpose. The most crucial element was the EMP generator, a device capable of disabling electronics within a massive radius. The Zarnaks' ships, reliant on their advanced technology, would be vulnerable. But activating the generator wasn't simple. It required a manual override, which meant he would have to stay behind to ensure it worked. He didn't hesitate. His life no longer mattered, not after what the Zarnaks had taken from him. This was about something far greater. If he could cripple their fleet, he could give humanity a fighting chance. As he prepared the generator, the facility's sensors detected movement outside. The Zarnaks had found him. He glanced at the monitor, watching as dozens of their soldiers surrounded the entrance. Their ships hovered overhead, their weapons aimed at the structure. They were coming for him, and they weren't holding back. He fortified his position, using the facility's defenses to buy himself time. Automated turrets roared to life, cutting down the first wave of attackers. He took up a sniper position near a window, picking off soldiers with precision. But the Zarnaks kept coming, their relentless advance a testament to their desperation. The facility shook as their ships fired on it, explosions rocking the walls. He worked quickly, calibrating the EMP generator while fending off the invaders. Time was running out, but he refused to let them stop him. The final sequence began, the generator's core glowing as it charged. He barricaded the control room, knowing the Zarnaks would reach him before it was complete. They breached the door moments later, their alien weapons lighting up the room. He fought them off, using every ounce of his training to hold them back. A shot grazed his shoulder, pain searing through him, but he didn't falter. He grabbed a detonator from his belt, triggering explosives he had planted earlier. The blast tore through the hallway, taking out the remaining soldiers and sealing the entrance. He slumped against the console, blood staining his gear. The generator was seconds away from activation, its hum reaching a deafening pitch. He closed his eyes, thinking of Jack and Emma one last time. Their laughter echoed in his mind, a reminder of why he had fought so hard. When the generator activated, a blinding pulse of energy surged outward, knocking out every piece of electronic equipment within miles. The Zarnaks' ships fell from the sky, crashing into the snow like lifeless husks. The remaining soldiers, cut off from their technology, were left vulnerable and disoriented. Humanity had a chance now, a sliver of hope in the face of overwhelming odds. He had done what he set out to do, and as the facility crumbled around him, he felt a strange sense of peace. The Zarnaks had taken his children, but they hadn't broken him. The settlement would rebuild, and the survivors would fight. His actions would become a legend, a story of defiance against impossible odds. And though he wouldn't live to see it, he knew he had made a difference. That was enough.